G'day everybody and welcome to this week's episode. I am super excited to be talking to you about this today because it's something that's really crystallized in my mind recently and it's something that I really want to bring to your attention. This is about the 8 critical mistakes that I see founders make that prevent them from scaling, from being able to exit or being able to step back from their business and what to do about it. So if you are a founder with 1 to 30 million in revenue, you're probably working towards one of 3 key goals in your own mind in the next 3 to 5 years. And I like to call it the Holy Trinity of options. The first one is to step up. In the next 3 to 5 years, you want to take on some investment from somebody else, take some chips off the table, bringing some investment capital to scale the business up to the next stage. Probably more likely if you're in like the 30 to 45 age range, but that's definitely one of the options. Option 2, some founders are looking to, in the next 3 to 5 years, to step out, position the business for a full exit, sell their equity entirely, sail off into the sunset, or do the next thing, whatever it is. Or 3, to be able to step back, to be able to build a business in such a way that in 3 to 5 years, you can install quality management, step out of the day-to-day, and keep the cash flow coming in and the dividends turning over. You might be making some mistakes at the moment that I've seen from my experience might scuttle those dreams and get in your way of being able to attract investment or to sell your business or to step back and install management. And so over this probably 2-part podcast, depending on how long it ends up going for, I'm going to unpack each of those mistakes. And then for each one of them, I'm going to give you an example of how making that mistake impacts your ability to step up, step out, or step back, because they're all impacted differently. So make sure you stay to the end of each episode because I'll explain to you exactly what you can do to diagnose where you might be making some of those mistakes right now, not just at the level of the 8 mistakes, but actually in the next level of detail. And if you are, what you can do about that. Now, before diving into them, I want to share a story with you. A real-world example from my life that highlights why these mistakes are so costly and how I saw these patterns turning up time and time again. Welcome to the Scale HQ podcast. I am Sean Steele and I'm a growth mentor, digital nomad, a massive metalhead, and the founder of Scale HQ. And you, more importantly, are a founder of a 7 or 8 figure services business who is finally ready to get serious about scaling up or securing a step back from your business or a life-changing exit in the next 3 to 5 years. And if that's you, then you are in the right place because with over 100 million in revenue growth across my last 4 companies and many acquisitions under my belt, I have spent my whole career figuring out what makes businesses more valuable, scalable, and sellable. And I've learned a couple of things, and I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to share those with you today. So welcome to your fortnightly dose of practical strategy, founder success stories, and expert deep dives to help you finally get a return on all that sacrifice that you've made in your business. Welcome to the show. Let's dive right in. In my corporate career, I led sales and marketing and business development for the Australian arm of a global education group that had about 3,000 employees. In Australia, we had about 1,600. Acquisition was a core strategy for us, and I was involved in numerous due diligence processes, evaluating potential businesses to buy, determining how much they're worth, and planning the integrations of those businesses. And then later on as a CEO, in my second CEO role, I was building an education portfolio for a company called AdventureCo. That is still running today. And myself and our investment director led teams through the process of conducting due diligence on businesses 1 to 30 million in revenue. And there are times actually where we had due diligence processes going on like 6 or 7 businesses at the same time in parallel, which was pretty insane, but we were getting through it. Over 4 years, we reviewed hundreds of businesses, but we actually only bought a few. And why is that? Because the majority of those businesses that we were screening were making errors in what they prioritized in the 3 years leading up to trying to sell us their businesses or to sell to anybody else. I'll give you an example. One of the businesses we evaluated was a $3 million revenue, $1 million EBITDA vocational training business run by a husband and wife team in their 50s. Let's call them Awesome Training. I'm obviously not going to tell you who they are. Now, if you are keen to step your business up to the next level, like by taking on an investor or stepping back and installing management so that you can enjoy dividends and get out of operations, or perhaps you want to secure a life-changing exit in the next 5 years in your business, well, whichever one of those 3 things you want, you are going to have to really think about what you prioritize over the next few years, because it's going to matter a lot as to whether you actually achieve those or not. And I see lots of founders staying trapped in their businesses way too long because they're not sure what to prioritize when it comes to the sort of working on their business. Like, great idea, but what do I actually focus on? And unfortunately, the things that got you to your first million or 2 are very different from what you're going to need to do to achieve one of those 3 outcomes. And that's why you're going to love my Scale Scorecard that I've developed. It is a new diagnostic tool, which I'm making available for free so that you can figure out where you're at right now and what you should focus on next. But it is not some made up fluff that I read in a book. This is real world scaling, investments, exits, It's my experience from having grown 4 companies by a total of 100 million in revenue. I've done due diligence on hundreds of businesses like yours as an investor. I've bought multiple companies. I've integrated them. I've led multiple turnarounds. So I've built a really deep understanding of what actually makes a difference in you being able to achieve one of those 3 outcomes. And so what I've done is reverse engineer all the ingredients that you need to think about across 8 key areas of your business into a simple survey. You can take it in 5 minutes. It's going to ask you 35 questions about your current strategy, execution, leadership, team, financials, offer, sales, and support. And then it's going to give you personalized recommendations about what to focus on and an opportunity for a free live growth audit where I will unpack your results with you if you'd like, and where I'll also give you my best thinking on what you should focus on in the next 90 days to build momentum quickly. No charge, totally free. So if you would like to maximize your chance of securing that step up or the step back or the step out, then come and find out your scale score at scalescorecard.com.au. It's scalescorecard.com.au, or just go to scalehq.com.au and click the button to take the quiz. Queensland-based business, great IP, high demand, solid margins. They were doing vocational training for adult learners, both directly to consumers as well as to businesses. And the business had all the marks of success from looking from the outside in, had unique intellectual property, had high barriers to entry, had a good reputation for quality of delivery, had a good sales and marketing process to acquire customers, and had a good growth rate. But there were 2 problems. Neither of these commercial in terms of looking at the numbers necessarily. One around leadership and another one around team. Problem 1, the founders were the business. And what I mean by that was they were doing 6 part-time jobs, I would say, between the 2 of them. Like the CEO, the part-time marketing manager, the sales manager, the delivery manager, finance, legal, product management, educational compliance. They were doing all of that, all the while not actually drawing any salaries. What they'd done was they had a sort of founder's mindset. They'd optimized the business for profitability, not for sustainable growth. And they were starting to get sick of it, and so they really wanted to sell it off because it was killing them because they were trying to do everything. And so they were presenting it as a $1 million maintainable EBITDA business. If you think about how you're positioning your business for sale, the investor is trying to figure out what is the sustainable, maintainable profit level. They were presenting it as $1 million business. However, the founders hadn't established a capable leadership layer, which made them incredibly risky for us and for any other buyer. And so if it was a standalone business, if we'd taken it over, we would have had to replace them with a capable management team quickly. So imagine now you're on the investor side and you now need to replace these 2 founders with a GM who runs the business at 200 grand, plus probably 4 or 5 other roles at about $80,000 each. That's $500,000 to $600,000 gone from the $1 million profit that they've proposed that they have just to replace the founders and make the business sustainable. So now suddenly the business is only making $500,000. But if you've paid $4 or $5 million based on the original $1 million of EBITDA and you thought you were going to pay 4 or 5 times the profitability, now you're actually paying 8 or 10 times the profitability. And so you've overpaid massively. The value is not going to be there anymore. And that, by the way, is mistake number 3, having capable leadership. Capable leadership that fails to inspire, trust and retain top talent, which starts with the capable leadership layer. That's the first issue. The second issue was, whilst they were getting a lot done, it was a dictatorial environment. There was no individual empowerment of the team. It felt like the staff were mushrooms, kept in the dark and fed on shit. It wasn't a transparent culture. The staff didn't know the strategy, therefore they didn't understand the strategy, therefore they didn't know why different things were being prioritized. They didn't know how the company was progressing towards important goals, therefore they didn't know if they were contributing to that or not. So it kind of resulted in this really uninspired workforce, doing the bare minimum, high levels of sick leave, low longevity of staff. They weren't enabled, they weren't empowered individually, they didn't know what success looked like for them. They weren't then receiving proper coaching and enablement and support to perform. They were just fed on tasks, then more tasks, then more tasks. And so the business was like run on task management and dictation, where the owners were constantly having to tell everybody their priorities. And that, if you were about to buy that business, would require an entire overhaul. A great question to think about is, does the business have a culture that you'd want to scale? If the answer is no, it's going to take a lot of work to create a big shift in culture, starting with the leaders and probably changing out a bunch of the team who've been sort of inculcated to work in that kind of environment. And that is mistake number 4, which I'm going to talk about today, which is about failing to enable individual success through clear expectations and the right kind of support. So my investor hat back on, what were our options? Our options were to offer these founders a much lower price to account for the expected profit drop to $500,000 versus $1 million, and knowing that we were still going to have to do a leadership and cultural turnaround. Or option 2, walk away. We chose to walk away. Now, put yourself back in their heads. They were generating $1 million in profit. Great dividends for them as owners, but that wasn't actually the outcome they wanted. And if you put yourself in their shoes, they build this business up over maybe 10 or 15 years, and they've mentally decided they want to sell. We've had enough of this. The work's too hard. We want to sell this business off. We've now got $1 million business. We're going to sell it. Someone's definitely going to buy it. Once you've mentally decided to sell, it's really hard to maintain your enthusiasm for your business. It can feel like a trap, and now you just can't wait to get this sale process over. But that's pretty challenging if you haven't built it in a way that actually makes it sellable. So what were their options? How could they have played out differently? Well, what if they prioritized in the 3 years prior building a management team in the 3 years? And that might have even just been somebody running sales and marketing and somebody else managing delivery. Even those two key roles. We would have been, as the investors and the new acquirers, but we would have been backing the capability of that team, not just the founders. They didn't have to be exclusively management roles even. They could have been combined leading and doing roles with capable people who would be able to step up, maybe, undertaking some leadership development, et cetera, et cetera. Would they still have had $1 million business at the time they wanted to sell to us? Maybe. Maybe they would have had less. Maybe they would have had more. Okay, maybe they would have had a little bit less because they would have had to spend some money on these salaries, but they probably would have still had at least 80% of that number and a sellable business, or a business they could step back from, which one of the things that's not obvious is if you've built your business in that way, it means that your love for the business and your patience for the business can extend. Because usually the reason that founders get to that stage and they want to sell is because they're working their asses off, they've had enough and they're tired and they can't step back from the business because they're still making all the decisions and they haven't built that management layer. Well, who knows? If they'd started 3 years earlier, maybe they would have been able to get it to 50 or 100% more. Maybe it would be at $1.5 or $2 million in profitability, because of the capability they would have recruited, sales and marketing and delivery, and they could have spent more time as founders on product, strategy, partnerships, growth, stuff they're really good at. So this whole profit stripping, keeping a super low skilled team, having to manage everything yourself can be a way to optimize profitability, but it also means you're going to have to stay there day in, day out, and it's going to start to feel more like a job over time than an asset because you can't actually step away from it easily at any point. As a side note, as I prepped this episode today, I checked back in on that business, and those owners are now nearly 60 and they're still running it today. Maybe by choice, maybe not, but that's just one example of a couple of major mistakes that the founders could have addressed differently in the 3 years prior to a sale, but that prevented them from achieving the Holy Trinity of options and ultimately the dreams that they had that made them build the business in the first place. But this is not an isolated incident. I saw this and other patterns of mistakes emerging as I was screening hundreds of businesses, so I was getting to see the patterns. And I realized that founders who haven't done this before and who are doing a great job and have a great business, but they're not prioritizing the right things because they don't know what they don't know, they end up in this trap, in this plateau where they're running super hard. The business growth starts to plateau because the business can't outgrow them and they're still making all the decisions, so they become the bottleneck. But it also means the enjoyment starts to go down. So the profitability might be good, but the enjoyment goes down and they run out of patience for the business. So if you don't keep building the foundations necessary to access that holy trinity of options, then you'll start to plateau at the worst time when you're working full tilt because the foundations aren't strong, the team's not strong, the processes and systems usually aren't scalable or sustainable. There's no predictable, scalable customer acquisition machine. You're running everything and then you're ready to leave and do the next thing, but you can't get out of it. Now you're trapped in there because you've probably still got at least 3 years of building all that stuff. And that is an awful, awful place to be. And to be frank, it actually really broke my heart because I saw founders who'd put decades worth of work sometimes into building their businesses, getting into their 50s often, seeing it as the opportunity to set up the life that they'd always dreamed for themselves. And they'd taken all this risk, but they hadn't sought out the right information, the right support, the right wisdom in their corner to make sure they prioritized the right things so that when they were ready to have one of those three options sort of activated, that the business would be in the right place. And that is what led me to build Scale HQ, because I wanted to help these founders, like the people who've been trying to sell to us, these 1 to 30 million revenue, doing it for the first time, don't know what they don't know, even when it's going well, to help them implement the methodologies required to break through that plateau, to build the business in a way that leads to the Holy Trinity in a reasonable time frame so they can fulfill the potential of the business and by doing so create the lifestyle that they dreamed of and get a return on the immense sacrifice that they'd made. So the last 4 years, what I've been doing is teaching founders to the same methodology that I developed and implemented with my teams to grow the last portfolio from 3 to 50 mil in 4 years, which has stood the test of time. They're now doing north of 100 mil by all reports, by developing a clear, simple, effective growth strategy and implementing an execution framework, methodology, a system that aligns people and the leadership to the strategy and helps them perform at their best. And I absolutely love this work. Helping founders like you, putting in the blood, sweat, and tears, making huge sacrifices to build your business, to focus on the right things so that you can achieve your dreams for your business, so you can create a lifestyle that you want by being able to step up, step back, or step out of it. So apologies for the long rant. It gets me a little bit worked up, but I am super passionate about this, and it kills me to see great founders with great businesses not make it there. Let us unpack the top mistakes that I see founders make that act as a wall between them and the Holy Trinity. But before we start, 2 quick notes. First of all is I am making the assumption that you're in a business that is serving a market where there's a real opportunity with a decent business model. I love Alex Hormozy's challenge on this. If your business is plateauing or just not getting ahead, the first question you have to ask is, am I spending 10 out of 10 time on a 2 out of 10 opportunity? Because if it's a 2 out of 10 opportunity, no one else is going to invest in it or buy it from you. So if you are stuck in the wrong business model in a market that's got no opportunity, it's probably a crap business or market or model. So it might be time to rethink and consider if you're backing the right horse. But let's assume you're focused on a great opportunity, you've got a good business model, you're creating real value in the world, but you need help to navigate from where you are to the Holy Trinity. So finally, I am going to give you a fair bit of material today. But don't sweat it, just engage. You don't need a pen. At the end, I'm going to tell you exactly how you can diagnose your own business, whether you're making one of these mistakes, what to do about it. So just stay with me, try these on, and see if you're making some of these issues in your business. Guaranteed you'll be making some. No one is perfect. The question is more, which is the biggest risk for you or the biggest issue for you? And we'll get to that. Okay, so mistake number 1 is in the strategy camp. Lack of a clear strategy and aligned execution plan. The first mistake founders make is not investing the time to develop a clear, well thought out strategy that actually delivers medium-term growth and competitive advantage, not just growth, with an aligned execution plan. So a clear strategy means you've actually got a purpose that matters and that people can buy into, your customers and your team care about. You've got clearly defined medium-term success measures so you know where you're heading. And most importantly, you've identified the 2 to 3 key initiatives above business as usual that even though they may not deliver immediate results, in the medium term will deliver you a competitive advantage. Not having that is like being on a ship on the water. You're sailing, right? You're moving, but without a rudder or a compass. So it feels like you're moving and you're going the same speed as other boats, but not efficiently towards a known destination. You're just out there sailing, getting blown around by the wind a bit. An aligned execution plan, what I mean by that is your execution plan ensures that those key initiatives, those priorities, that sort of medium-term competitive advantage building towards that stuff doesn't get lost in the day-to-day operational grind, like the busyness of BAU, business as usual. And to be honest, most business plans for the year with founders who are working with their leaders or their managers get built bottom up. So asking people what the priorities are in their function. What do you think we should do this year in training? What should we do this year in sales? What should we develop? They're not thinking about what the strategy is and how to make sure that those high priority but non-urgent initiatives get airtime, get focus on top of BAU. And there is time. But if those things aren't up in lights, they're not being returned to and discussed month in, month out, they're not going to happen because you just end up reacting to everything that's going on. So let's talk about why that is a problem. So not having a strategy that delivers both growth and competitive advantage, as well as an aligned execution plan, why is that a problem for your Holy Trinity? On the step-up side, investors, if that's about investment, remember, investors want to see a clear roadmap for how their capital is going to fuel growth. So if you don't have a well-defined strategy and an aligned execution plan, they're going to be questioning whether your business is going to scale, but ultimately whether it's actually going to deliver the returns they expect. Because their capital may not be getting used efficiently because it's not going towards something that's going to make the business better, not only bigger over time. From a sale perspective or a step out, buyers aren't just purchasing what you have today, but they're also buying the future potential of your business. So if your business lacks a clear strategy and an aligned execution plan, they might see it as riskier because they're going to have to invest the time and the resources to develop the strategy. Well, they don't want to do that. They want you to have done that. And then finally, from a step back perspective, you want to step back and install management. Awesome. Most managers, general managers and so on, aren't going to come up with a strategy. They want a clear strategy and execution plan to guide their priorities and decisions. So they might get in there and look really busy and they'll be sailing, but it doesn't mean they're getting your business anywhere specific. So if they start heading in a direction that you don't like, you might start seeing inconsistent results and issues that actually draw you back into the business because you feel like it's not progressing. They think like they're super busy, everything's happening, and you're thinking we're not getting anywhere, and that's because there's no real strategy. And it's not really their job to come up with it, it's your job to come up with it. So that is mistake number 1, which is all about not having a strategy and an aligned execution plan. Okay, mistake number 2 is in the execution camp. Ad hoc execution that lacks rhythm and scalability. So what does a business look like or feel like when it doesn't have a well-organized, rhythmic approach to execution. It kind of looks like this. I see this many times. The planning and reporting cycles in the business are pretty ad hoc. So there's like strategy workshops that happen when the founder feels like it. There's no clear, 1 year, quarterly, monthly list of, key priorities linked to the strategy that ensures everyone's focused on the right things all the time and are visibly accountable for achieving the big ones in the right time frames. That's just not really there. It's just a bit sloppy. There's often lots of repetitive, time-consuming tasks that haven't been automated or standardized, and so the team spends a lot of time on low-value things. It looks like quite often everything's been insourced, and there's no outsourcing of things that actually you're not expert in. You're trying to do absolutely everything. So rather than using experts in key areas that you can have as a variable cost, you've insourced it with a lower level resource for a fixed cost. So, for example, maybe you need to do Facebook marketing. Well, you can either have a $60,000 resource doing Facebook marketing who doesn't really know much about it and is learning on your dime, or you could have an expert Facebook ads agency who's maybe going to take a percentage of revenue and a small retainer, which gives you somebody who's performance-oriented and experienced, because maybe doing Facebook ads is not actually core business for you, is not your core skill set. So this is about, are you insourcing everything or are you getting the right balance between insourcing and outsourcing? Probably, if execution's sloppy, you don't have a clear set of KPIs that measure the right leading and lagging indicators on a real-time or even daily basis. There's no dashboards, so you end up making slow decisions, reactive decisions, poor decisions, because you don't have any data in front of you to know how things are going fast enough to correct them quickly enough, so actually you end up with sloppy performance for longer than is reasonable, because you just can't see the information. Sloppy execution often looks like you got too many systems. They're not well integrated, and therefore the processes that touch those systems usually won't scale, because if you think about, put your investor hat on, if somebody puts pressure on the top line by investing, because they want to invest money in sales and marketing, right, to grow your top line and bottom line. But if your operational team structure, your systems and your processes are going to fall apart, the quality of delivery is going to suffer as you scale, and you can end up with big reputational issues. That is a risk for an investor. And finally, it probably looks like if you don't have well-organized execution, you probably also don't have a customer journey that's been designed to systematically exceed expectations, which means you're probably relying on people to do an excellent job all the time to delight your customers, rather than your customers buying from you a process that produces excellence even by average people who look like heroes all the time because of all the surprise and delight points and the great experiences actually built into the design of the process, where your quality of experience becomes scalable. And that, if you're in a services business, is a huge risk. If you try to scale too fast and you can't scale up that customer experience, you're going to end up with reputational problems. If that sounds like you, it means there's some opportunity to improve. But what's the issue for the three options? Okay, well, let's look at the step up first. The step up or the step out, probably similar. So taking on investment or selling entirely. If you don't have scalability in your operations, you are going to get a lower valuation. Why? Because the business now has lots of time-consuming work to do to build the scalability in its operations. It might be 1 or 2 years before you can kind of get all of your ducks in a row to then be able to push on the top line. So investors are going to have a problem with that, because they'll say, well, why don't you chat to me in 1 or 2 years once you're ready for scalability? Because otherwise it impacts their ability to get optimal returns. They want to deploy capital, immediately push it into sales and marketing, and know that it's going to flow through to your profitability quickly. And they can't know that for sure. If they don't know it for sure, it means their risk goes up. And if their risk goes up, your valuation comes down, because that's essentially what a valuation is. It's an assessment of how many years it's going to take to get the profitability back to meet the price. So if I'm paying 3 times profitability, that's saying if you don't grow at all, it's going to take me 3 years of your profits before I get my money back, before I make a single dollar. So they obviously want that to be as short as possible. And if they think you have to spend 2 years getting your operations together to make them scalable, now's not the time to make that investment. Issue number 2 is actually that if they can't see that you've got a way of sort of re-looking at your strategy on a semi-regular basis, like at least annually, and then being able to adapt, adjust, and feed it into an execution machine that works, rhythmic execution that gets things done, then you're probably also going to be slow to respond to changes in the market, customer needs, preferences, or whatever, or opportunities, because you just can't operationalize things quickly because you don't have an execution system. And so then finally, what about a step back? Okay, I want to put in a general manager. Can't they deal with all this stuff? Well, the issue is that a new general manager or ops manager is probably going to struggle because there's so much to improve, which again will probably result in inconsistent results, and you'll probably blame them for that. But in reality, perhaps you've been holding it together with Band-Aids and you now want to push them to cope with growth, not to be watching them struggle to keep their head above water operationally and just have a full-time job just trying to manage business as usual. That's a really hard way to step back and frustrating for owners. So that is mistake number 2, is the sloppy execution stuff. Ad hoc, not rhythmic, not quite together. Okay, let's look at mistake number 3. Mistake number 3 is about leadership. It's about not having capable leadership in place that can inspire trust and retain top talent. It reminds me of a quote or a comment, Ben Handler, who I interviewed on this podcast a little while back. It runs the Buyer's Agent Institute out of Australia, and his comment was, B players will F your business. Pure and simple. Having a team full of B players is a huge problem. So let me ask you 5 questions in this area. Do you have a capable leadership team in place, particularly 2 key roles, one that drives customer acquisition and one that drives delivery? That's question 1. Okay, question 2. How confident are you that you and your leaders are all exemplifying your business's values consistently, if you're honest with yourself? Have you seen people in the team leave who were great and you can actually tell that it was because of the leader that they were reporting to? If that's happening, then they're probably not living and breathing your values. I don't mean perfection, but if you or your leaders are doing things that are not consistent with your values and not publicly taking ownership of it if you make a mistake and addressing it so that people see that you're real, but you also take ownership, if that's not happening, you're going to lose trust of good people. And I can tell you that A players have a very low tolerance for leaders who don't act in accordance with the values. You can't tell people to act one way and then act a different way yourselves. Question 3, do you and your leaders ruthlessly prioritize and reprioritize work to make sure that objectives and deadlines get met? Or do they, or maybe you, regularly let the deadline slide past? Hey, it's no big deal. There's no conversation around it. It just continues to move to the right. Or do you see them, your leaders, kind of actively push back when you're trying to add more priorities into their mix and they're like, hey, we can't get this done, Sean. If we want this done and that done by then, we can't do that. If they're saying yes to everything, what they're probably doing is they're now pushing all of that pressure down to the team and they're making their whole team fail and overwhelming them. And then they start missing deadlines on a constant basis. Why? Because they can't say no to you, or you haven't made them feel they can. And therefore they're also setting that premise for the team that it's not okay for the team to say no. You have to be able to prioritize and reprioritize to make sure important deadlines get met. Question 4 for you. Do you or your leaders let people stay in the business too long and or not courageously sort of manage the attitudes or values and behaviors issues or performance issues as soon as they arise? Like never walking past an issue or a suboptimal behavior or poor performance without addressing it straight away. Let me give you a very common scenario. The common scenario is for 2 kinds of people that leaders tend to let stick around too long. The first is people who've got the technical skills, but these people, their communication, their attitude, it's just not where it needs to be. And deep down, they actually negatively affect other people in your team. Maybe they're too pushy or too direct, or they've got no tact, or they're a bit of a bulldozer, or they're too brutal, or too negative, just a little bit toxic. They're not terrible, but they also have the technical skills to get the job done. They are a big problem. The second group of people is the people who are awesome for your culture. Well, they seem awesome for the culture, but they don't actually quite have the technical skills to do the job. So they're friendly, they're happy, but they're ineffective, and other people have to carry their workload. Either way, those 2 kinds of people are B- or C players, and both of them are a problem, because if they won't or can't change and you're letting them stay, what you're saying to all your high performers and high potentials is that standard is okay. Well, why is an A player going to stay and give their all to your business when they have to either carry weak players or deal with dickheads who don't get managed by you or your leaders? That's not fair. That is precisely how you lose your best people. They do not want to stay in a subpar team. They want to be in a high-performing team. So what are you settling for? And that, by the way, will actually get discovered by an investor smart enough to pay attention when they're meeting key people in your business as part of the due diligence process. It's important to recognize that discretionary effort of your team can only be accessed when the team respects the leaders, because those leaders address performance issues rapidly and they don't settle for idiots who negatively affect other people in the team. They address it. People respect that, and high performers absolutely expect it. Finally, do you and your leaders publicly recognize the contributions and efforts of both teams and individuals? Or is it only the favorites that get their names up in lights? Do they notice the little things by the frontline team and call them out as great examples of your values and behaviors, even if it doesn't directly correlate with some kind of financial win? If not, there's an opportunity for improvement there. And if you're listening to these going, geez, that's all that is happening in my business, I don't want you feeling bad about it if these things are happening. It's not about beating yourself up. It's recognizing there's room for improvement and deciding where to tackle first. But let's talk about why that matters for your Holy Trinity. Let's talk about the step up and the step out together. Again, taking on investment or selling entirely. I've done many investment papers for acquisitions and due diligence processes. And I can tell you there is a whole section on the people and the culture and a separate section on the leadership. So there's basically one on the team and the culture and one on the leadership. It's not all just commercial numbers. Investors know and buyers know that a business that's got quality leaders will be able to access discretionary effort, have lower turnover, be able to attract and keep A players. It reduces their risk because the investor is not walking into or the new buyer is not walking to some sort of cultural shit fight where everyone's doing the minimum. Dead wood gets to hang around. That creates higher turnover, which increases the recruitment costs or increases the training costs. They're going to think twice about putting money into a business where the leaders can't inspire the team to do more than the bare minimum to get a paycheck. Now, yes, if they're planning on replacing the leader or you as the founder, then it's not unsolvable, but it takes a long time to build a high-performing culture and it starts at the top. But what about your step-back option? Well, if the leaders you've got who are now going to be reporting to the new GM or CEO that you put in place and they're not performing at the right level, then maybe this is not your strong point and you're looking for a stronger people leader to come in and develop that. And that is definitely possible. However, recognize they're probably just going to come in and do the things that are a bit uncomfortable that you should do. You just don't really want to, or it's just a bit, you just don't enjoy that kind of pushback. The pushback on poor leadership behaviors, the raising the standards for leaders. And yes, the issue is that your current leaders who are going to report to this new GM might find those changes tough if it comes from a new leader. Why not do it yourself now? Get the benefit now. And then when you bring in a new leader, they can focus on growth, not on leadership culture issues. So that is mistake number 3, which is all about not having a capable leadership layer in place that can actually inspire people to want to perform and be able to retain good people, the A players, attract and retain them. So mistake number 4 is about team. This is about failing to enable individual success through clear expectations and support. So this is another people-themed item, but it's not just about the leadership behaviors, it's actually about what's in place for each individual to help them understand what success looks like, and then the enablers in place to allow them to perform at their optimum level. So it's a bit more nuanced. I'm going to give you 5 questions here. Can you confidently say right now that you have ultra clear success criteria for each team member that they know and understand and have agreed to? What a good week or month looks like from your perspective in terms of the rhythmic month-to-month business activities that they need to get done. I don't just mean the task, I mean the lead and lag indicators of success. Are they clear about what attitudes and competencies and knowledge and experience do you want to see them developing in? Are they clear about what behaviors in line with your business values you want to see them focus on? Are they clear about their critical deliverables for the year? They're probably the last one. But for a lot of people, question mark on the first 4. And do they get quality, regular feedback, no less than monthly, on how they're going? Do they self-assess how they're going against that success criteria? And do they get feedback from their manager, at least monthly, on how they're going? If you're thinking, yep, look, I've got a job description, they've got a list of all the tasks they're responsible for, we do a 12-month performance review for feedback, and we chat about things all the time. Sorry, that does not cut it. They deserve more. They need to know exactly what success looks like from your perspective, and they need to be getting feedback on it all the time, and they need to be self-assessing against that so they have ownership of their role. Second question, do you systematically, at least once a year, sort of step back and plot your whole team against some kind of a grid, a matrix, an evaluation tool to figure out where they're at in terms of performance, between kind of high and low, and where they're at in terms of leadership potential, high and low, and to figure out essentially what couple of things you're going to prioritize with that person to take them to the next level next year or this year, or to move them out or just accept that that's where they're going to stay. Like actually stepping back and thinking about your team and the makeup of your team is an important process. Question 3, do you as the founder have a leadership activity where you're constantly and proactively reaching out for chats and coffees with potential talent, which is called talent pooling, to attract A players into high impact roles that you're planning on recruiting in the next 12 to 18 months? Question 4, have you got a performance-based compensation model for the team or for individuals where it makes sense to, rather than just constant never-ending base increases for your teams? And I'm not saying you can get away from having base increases. The reality is bases go up, but high performers like to have things to strive for, both as individuals and as a team. So having the right performance-based incentives can be a big motivator. And then finally, question 5, do you have a rhythmic way, like monthly town halls with the whole team, for example, where you communicate the vision, the priorities, the progress, the challenges, the learnings, so everyone knows what the priorities are as a whole team? They all the time know how they're going towards fulfilling the potential, the purpose, the vision, and the strategy of the business. They feel part of it. They have a sense of ownership of their contribution to the success of your business. If the answer is no to the majority of those, then there's more that you can do to enable the success of each individual. And the reality is there's not that much that's more important than that, because your organizational success comes from the success of every individual in your team, and they need to know what success looks like. They need to have their manager actively developing them to the next level. They need to see their manager actively managing poor performers out. They need other A players in the team. They want to be part of a high-performing team, so your talent pooling work helps. They want a performance-based compensation or some kind of a mix of individual team. They want to know how the business is going. They want to feel part of its success. They want to know that actually they're part of something that matters. They want meaning, and they want to feel valued. How does it then affect your Holy Trinity? The step up or the step out? Well, for an investor or buyer perspective, it takes a shrewd due diligence team, to be honest, and not all of them will pick this stuff up as to whether these things are happening or not. But they will tease it out in dialogue with key team members. Like, does that person understand exactly what they need to do to be successful? Do they know how the business is going overall? Do they have a sense of ownership of the strategy? Do they feel part of the business's success, not just grinding out tasks? They'll also see this in employee engagement scores, so it's pretty hard to hide, and many buyers will actually ask you during the due diligence process to do an employee engagement survey if you don't already have a recent one, so they can actually see what the culture is like, objectively, quantitatively. So they want to know that you have got your, shit together, let's call it, people-wise, and they'll see in the data and in the conversations and so on. And then from a step-back perspective, I don't know about you, but if I didn't already have this in place as a founder, I'd be pretty low in confidence that a new general manager was going to put this stuff in place. I haven't seen that many general managers be good at implementing this stuff or coming up with what needs to be implemented. They can often run the process as well, but if you want to step back, I'd be thinking of this as frameworks that are going to help you and that are going to enable the general manager when you get to that stage if the step back is your goal. So number 4 is all about team. It's about having the things in place to enable the success of individuals.